The person you call your soulmate may have already told a stranger about you. And that stranger is not supposed to know your name. Not your story. Not the memories you shared. Not the reason your soulmate still thinks about you when nobody is watching. Yet somehow, they know. And they are trying to find you. Before you dismiss this as another love story, listen carefully. There is one detail you do not know. Your soulmate did not approach this stranger because they wanted help finding you. That conversation happened for a completely different reason. And by the end of tonight, you are going to understand why your name became part of it. Because this stranger discovered something your soulmate never intended to reveal. Something so personal, they immediately realized this was not an ordinary connection. Stay with me. The most important part has not happened yet. It started with a conversation that seemed completely harmless. Two people sitting together. No dramatic setting. No warning. No plan. Just an ordinary moment that should have ended like thousands of others. Then the stranger asked a question. Is there someone you still think about? Your soulmate smiled. Not because the question was funny. Because they already knew the answer. There was a pause. A long one. The kind of silence that exposes what someone is trying to hide. Finally, your soulmate spoke. Yes. One word. That was enough. The stranger noticed the change immediately. The relaxed expression disappeared. The voice became quieter. Suddenly, this was no longer casual conversation. The stranger asked for a name. Your soulmate refused. At first. Then came another question. What happened between you? That question opened the door. Your soulmate began describing someone. Someone they had never completely understood. Someone who appeared unexpectedly, and left a mark that never disappeared. They mentioned little things. A certain look. A particular laugh. A conversation that lasted longer than expected. A moment that seemed insignificant at the time. The stranger listened without interrupting. Then your soulmate said something unexpected. I should have said more. The stranger immediately asked, more about what? Your soulmate looked away. About how I felt. That sentence changed the entire conversation. Because now the stranger understood something. This was not simply someone from the past. This was unfinished. There was still emotion underneath the silence. Still a question without an answer. Still a door that had never completely closed. The stranger wanted details. Your soulmate gave very few. But one thing became obvious. You mattered. More than your soulmate had ever admitted publicly. The stranger asked whether you knew. Another silence. Then came the answer. I don't think they ever understood. Think about that. Your soulmate believed you had no idea how deeply you affected them. Perhaps that is why the distance remained. Perhaps both of you were waiting for clarity that neither person had the courage to ask for. But the stranger noticed something else. Whenever your soulmate talked about you, the story changed. The tone softened. The memories became sharper. The details became strangely precise. That raised a question. How long had your soulmate been carrying all of this? The stranger asked. Your soulmate answered, longer than I should have. Then came another revelation. Your soulmate admitted that there had been several moments when they almost contacted you. Several times when your name appeared on a screen. Several nights when a message was written, and never sent. The stranger stared. You still have their number? Yes. Then why haven't you called? Your soulmate had no immediate answer. Eventually, the truth came out. I don't know if they want to hear from me. That sentence carried more weight than anything before it. Because fear was sitting underneath the silence. Fear of rejection. Fear of embarrassment. Fear that too much time had passed. And perhaps the deepest fear of all, that you had moved on. The stranger asked whether your soulmate knew what was happening in your life now. The answer was surprising. No. Then the stranger asked, would you want to know? Your soulmate hesitated. Yes. That single word changed everything. Because now the stranger had a choice. Walk away, or investigate. They decided to investigate. Not because they were trying to interfere. Not because they wanted to become part of your relationship. At first, it was simple curiosity. They wanted to understand why one person could still have such an effect on someone who appeared perfectly fine. So they started with the smallest clue. Your first name. Then a place. Then an old memory. 3 pieces. Nothing more. But sometimes 3 pieces are enough to build a dangerous puzzle. The stranger began searching. A few possibilities appeared. Most were wrong. One seemed promising. Then another clue surfaced. Your soulmate had mentioned something almost accidentally. A place you once visited. The stranger remembered it. They checked again. This time, the connection became stronger. There was a possibility. A very real one. You were not as far away as everyone assumed. The stranger stopped. Because suddenly this no longer felt like harmless curiosity. Finding you meant crossing a line. So they contacted your soulmate. The call was short. The question was direct. Do you want me to find them? Your soulmate did not answer. Seconds passed. Then came a quiet response. I don't know. The stranger asked, that's not what I asked. Silence. Finally. I want to know they're okay. That answer revealed something important. Your soulmate was not ready to confess everything. They simply wanted confirmation that you were safe. That you were living. That life had not broken you in the places they once feared. The stranger promised not to contact you. At least for the moment. But something happened later that night. Something neither person expected. The stranger found an old photograph. It had been buried inside a forgotten conversation. There were several people in the picture. Nothing unusual. Until they zoomed in. There you were. Not alone. Standing beside someone the stranger recognized. Their expression changed instantly. Because that person was connected to your soulmate. And suddenly, the entire timeline looked different. You had crossed paths before. Maybe you never realized it. Maybe your soulmate knew. Maybe neither of you understood the significance. But there was another connection hiding in plain sight. The stranger stared at the photograph for a long time. Then they noticed something else. The date. Their heart sank. The picture had been taken before your soulmate ever admitted having feelings for you. Which meant one thing. The story did not begin when you thought it did. Your soulmate had noticed you earlier. Much earlier. Perhaps before either of you understood what was happening. The stranger went back through every detail. The places. The dates. The conversations. The names. And then, they found something that changed their entire understanding. A message. Not from your soulmate. Not from you. From someone else. The message contained only a few words. But those words were enough to make the stranger stop breathing for a moment. Because they suggested that someone had already known about the connection. Someone had been watching from a distance. Someone knew your soulmate was emotionally attached to you. Someone knew you might never realize it. And someone had kept that information hidden. The stranger immediately called your soulmate again. This time, the answer came quickly. What did you find? The stranger asked, who else knows about them? No response. I'm asking you directly. Still nothing. Then your soulmate said, "Please don't look any further." The stranger froze. That was not the response of someone protecting a secret romance. It sounded like someone protecting a person. The stranger asked why. Your soulmate finally answered. Because if you find them, you may uncover something they were never supposed to know. And there it was. The sentence that changed the entire story. There was something about you, something connected to your soulmate, that had never been revealed. Not because the truth was unimportant. Because the truth was dangerous to the fragile distance between you. The stranger asked one final question. What are you hiding? Your soulmate remained silent. Then the call ended. But the stranger was already looking at the photograph again. At your face. At the date. At the person standing beside you. And suddenly they realized something terrifying. They had been searching for the wrong person. The stranger did not need to find you. They needed to find the person who knew what happened before you ever met your soulmate. And that person was much closer than anyone realized. Because they were already part of your life. And they had been waiting for the right moment to speak. But they had one condition. They would only reveal the truth if your soulmate contacted you first. And your soulmate had just made a decision. A decision that would put your name on their screen again, after all this time. But what they were about to send you was not the message you expected. And the stranger was about to discover why. Your soulmate opened your conversation. Your name was sitting there. Quietly. Waiting. No message had been sent. Not yet. The cursor blinked inside the empty text box. One sentence appeared. Then disappeared. Another followed. Deleted. Again. Your soulmate was fighting a battle you could never see. The stranger stood nearby, watching without saying a word. Finally, your soulmate typed something simple. I need to tell you something. They stared at it. Their finger hovered over the screen. Then the message vanished. The stranger asked, why did you erase it? Your soulmate answered, because once they know, everything changes. That answer made the stranger even more suspicious. What exactly changes? Your soulmate looked toward the window. Everything they believe about us. The stranger stepped closer. Then tell them. Your soulmate shook their head. You don't understand. Then explain. Another silence. This time, something different happened. Your soulmate finally revealed a piece of the past that had never been mentioned before. There had been a moment when your soulmate almost told you everything. It happened during a conversation neither of you considered important. You were talking. Laughing. Moving through an ordinary day. Then you said something. A sentence so small that you probably forgot it. Your soulmate never did. Those words became the reason they pulled away. Not because you hurt them. Because you accidentally confirmed their greatest fear. You were capable of walking away. You were stronger than they expected. You could survive without them. And instead of feeling relieved, they became terrified. The stranger asked, what did they say? Your soulmate refused to repeat it. But there was something in their expression. Regret. Deep regret. The stranger understood that whatever happened during that conversation had stayed buried for a long time. Then another question came. Did they ever know you loved them? Your soulmate looked down. No, did you ever tell them? No, why? This time the answer came immediately. Because I thought there would be another chance. The stranger slowly exhaled. There it was. The mistake. Your soulmate had assumed time would create another opportunity. Time did the opposite. Distance grew. Circumstances changed. People moved. Life became complicated. And eventually, the silence became normal. But feelings don't always disappear simply because communication stops. Sometimes they become quieter. Sometimes they hide inside memories. Sometimes they return when the person least expects them. That night, your soulmate finally admitted something else. They had recently seen something connected to you. A name. A photograph. A place. Something that reopened everything. The stranger asked what it was. Your soulmate refused to answer. Then the phone buzzed. A new message. Not from you. From the person connected to the old photograph. Your soulmate read it. Their face changed. The stranger immediately noticed. What happened? No answer. Who sent that? Still nothing. Your soulmate turned the screen away. But the stranger caught one sentence before it disappeared. It's time. 2 words. That's all. Yet they carried the weight of years. The stranger asked what it meant. Your soulmate finally looked up. It means they know. Who knows? Your soulmate whispered your name. The stranger stared. Wait. You mean they know about you? No, a pause. They know about us. The room became completely silent. Because now the mystery had taken another turn. Someone had apparently been aware of your connection long before the stranger ever entered the story. But who? And why had they stayed quiet? The stranger wanted answers. Your soulmate wanted distance. Neither got what they wanted. Because the person who sent that message followed it with another. A photograph. Your soulmate opened it. Their hands went still. The stranger saw the reaction. What is that? Your soulmate didn't respond. Let me see. No, that single word was enough. The stranger realized the photograph contained something deeply personal. Something connected directly to you. Eventually, your soulmate showed it. The stranger looked at the image. Then looked back. That's impossible. Your soulmate nodded. I know. The photograph showed you. But not in the way they expected. It was taken years earlier. You were standing somewhere familiar. And beside you, was the same person from the old photograph. The person who had been silently connected to both sides of the story. The stranger suddenly understood. This was not a new connection. It was an old one. A connection that had been hidden in ordinary moments. A connection nobody had recognized because nobody had looked closely enough. The stranger asked, "Did you know this person?" Your soulmate answered, "Yes." Did they know you knew them? Yes. Did they know about your feelings? Another pause. Yes. Now the stranger was stunned. Someone had known. Someone had watched. Someone had stayed silent. And the biggest question remained. Why? The answer came from the message that followed. Don't tell them yet. The stranger stared at the screen. Why not? Your soulmate didn't know. Neither did the stranger. But another message arrived. Let them remember first. That sentence made no sense. Remember what? A place? A person? A moment? The stranger asked your soulmate. Your soulmate suddenly became pale. There was one memory they had never discussed. A memory from before the relationship. Before the feelings. Before the distance. A strange encounter that seemed meaningless at the time. You had crossed paths. Briefly. Neither of you recognized the importance. But someone else had noticed. Someone who understood that the meeting would matter later. Your soulmate remembered the scene. You probably didn't. Or perhaps you remembered it differently. That possibility frightened them. Because if you remembered, then the entire story would have to be reconsidered. The stranger asked, what happened that day? Your soulmate finally began talking. You had been somewhere unexpected. A place neither of you normally visited. You were there for a completely different reason. Your soulmate happened to be there too. You spoke for only a few minutes. Nothing romantic happened. No confession. No dramatic moment. Just an ordinary interaction. Yet your soulmate remembered one detail. You looked at them as if you had seen them before. You hadn't. At least, not according to either of you. The stranger asked, "Did you ever ask them about it?" "No, why?" "Because I was afraid of the answer." That sentence stayed in the room. Then the stranger asked something even more important. "What if they remember?" Your soulmate whispered, "Then they might remember who else was there." The stranger's expression changed. "Who else?" Your soulmate looked at the photograph. The answer was obvious. The person who had been quietly connected to the story. The person who knew more than anyone realized. The person who had just sent the message. Suddenly, the stranger understood why they had been warned not to find you. The search wasn't dangerous because of what they might discover about your soulmate. It was dangerous because they might uncover what happened before the two of you ever became emotionally connected. And that history could change the meaning of everything. The stranger asked for one final piece of information. "Where did you meet that day?" Your soulmate gave them the location. The stranger recognized it instantly. Their expression dropped. Because that location was not random. It was connected to their own past. Now they were personally involved. They remembered being there. They remembered the day. They remembered the people around them. And then, a forgotten memory surfaced. Someone had asked them about you. Years ago. Someone had wanted to know whether you were okay. The stranger had completely forgotten. Until now. They reached for their phone. Old messages. Old contacts. Old conversations. They searched. And there it was. A message from years earlier. A message containing your name. But the sender was not your soulmate. Not the person from the photograph. It was someone else. Someone the stranger had never connected to the story. The stranger opened the conversation. Their hands began to shake. Because the final message in that old conversation contained a question. "Do you think they know?" Below it was the reply. "Not yet." The stranger stared at those words. Not yet. 2 words that had survived years. 2 words that suddenly explained everything. Someone had been waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for you to discover the truth naturally. Waiting for your soulmate to become brave enough to speak. And now, that moment was approaching. Your soulmate finally picked up the phone again. This time, there was no hesitation. Your conversation opened. The stranger watched. A message appeared. "I don't know if I should tell you this." Then another. "There is something you deserve to know." Your soulmate stopped. The stranger said, "Send it." The message was delivered. Your phone lit up. You saw the notification. You opened it. And the first sentence made your heart stop. "I met you before you remember meeting me." You read it again. Then again. But that wasn't the real shock. Because another message arrived immediately afterward. "I wasn't alone that day." Your mind went back through old memories. Faces. Places. Voices. Nothing fit. Then your soulmate sent one final sentence. "The stranger looking for you knows what happened." And suddenly, the person who had been searching for you was no longer searching from curiosity. They were searching because they had remembered something. Something from that day. Something involving you. Something involving your soulmate. And something that had been deliberately kept from both of you. The stranger looked at your name on the screen. Then they made a decision. They were going to find you. Not tomorrow. Not eventually. Tonight. But before leaving, they received one final message. It wasn't from your soulmate. It came from the person who had kept the secret all these years. Only 4 words appeared. Don't tell them yet. The stranger stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. First, ask them what they remember. And that was when the stranger realized the terrifying possibility. Maybe the secret wasn't being hidden from you. Maybe, you had forgotten it. Your phone was still in your hand. The message remained on the screen. I met you before you remember meeting me. You read it again. Something about those words felt wrong. Not impossible. Familiar. As if a locked door inside your memory had suddenly moved. You searched your mind. Nothing. Then came another notification. Your soulmate had sent one more message. Think about the place near the old building. You knew the place. But you couldn't understand why it mattered. Your fingers stopped moving. For a few seconds, everything around you became strangely quiet. Then a memory surfaced. Not a complete memory. A fragment. Rain. A doorway. Someone standing nearby. A voice saying your name. You couldn't see the face. You couldn't remember the conversation. But you remembered one thing. You were not alone. Across town, the stranger was looking at the same old photograph. They had stopped searching online. They were searching their own memory now. That was harder. Because memories don't stay organized. They hide details. They distort dates. They remove faces. But one scene kept returning. The old building. The rain. A crowded entrance. And you. The stranger remembered seeing you there. Not years later. Not recently. That exact day. They remembered something else too. Your soulmate was present. But neither of you seemed to know the other. At least, not yet. The stranger suddenly understood why the old message had said, "Let them remember first." Someone knew this memory existed. Someone knew it had been buried. Someone knew that forcing the truth too quickly could destroy the very connection everyone was trying to protect. The stranger called your soulmate. No answer. Again. Nothing. Then the call finally connected. The first words were simple. Tell me the truth. Your soulmate remained silent. You knew about that day. Yes. You remembered them. Yes. Why didn't you say anything? A long pause. Because I thought it was coincidence. The stranger shook their head. You still believe that? No, that answer changed everything. Your soulmate had stopped believing in coincidence. Not because of one event. Because of several. The same places appearing repeatedly. Unexpected encounters. Names resurfacing. People mentioning things they shouldn't know. Every piece had seemed meaningless by itself. Together, they formed a pattern. The stranger asked, "When did you realize it wasn't random?" Your soulmate answered, "The second time I saw them." The stranger froze. The second time? Yes. You never told me there was a second encounter. I wasn't ready. Where? Your soulmate gave the location. The stranger knew it. They had been there too. That was the moment the stranger realized something even stranger. All 3 lives had crossed through the same places. Again. And again. Without anyone realizing the connection. The stranger looked through their old messages. A name appeared. A person who had once mentioned you. Another contact. Another reference. Another forgotten conversation. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate had not been the only person who noticed you. Other people had. But why? What made your presence so memorable? The stranger didn't have an answer. Then your soulmate said something that changed the direction of the conversation. There's one memory I never told you about. What memory? The first time I heard their voice. The stranger waited. Your soulmate began describing it. You were speaking to someone else. Your soulmate wasn't part of the conversation. They were standing nearby. They heard your voice without seeing your face. Nothing romantic happened. Nothing dramatic. Yet something about that voice stayed with them. Later, when they finally saw you, they recognized it. That's why the first real meeting felt strangely familiar. They hadn't known why. Now they did. The stranger asked, "Did you ever tell them?" "No, why?" "Because it sounds impossible." The stranger laughed softly. "Your entire story sounds impossible." Neither of them laughed after that. Because there was another detail. A detail the stranger had just discovered. The person who had been hiding the truth had kept records. Dates. Locations. Names. Not because they were spying. Because something had happened years ago that made them believe these encounters mattered. The stranger found an old notebook. Inside were several dates. One belonged to the day you first crossed paths. Another belonged to the second encounter. Another matched the moment your soulmate first admitted having feelings. The dates formed a sequence. But there was one blank space. A date missing between the second encounter and the beginning of your emotional connection. The stranger stared at it. What happened here? Your soulmate didn't know. Neither did the stranger. Then they turned the page. There was a single sentence. Wait until they remember. No explanation. No name. Nothing else. The stranger suddenly realized the missing event might be the key. They needed to know what happened on that day. So they went looking. Meanwhile, you were trying to remember. The old building. The rain. The doorway. The voice. Something kept pulling at your mind. Then you remembered a stranger. Not your soulmate. Someone standing several feet away. Watching. You couldn't remember the face. But you remembered the eyes. And that was enough. You closed your eyes. Another fragment appeared. Someone had handed you something. A small object. You couldn't see what it was. You remembered putting it away. Then forgetting about it. Your breathing changed. You searched through old belongings. Drawers. Boxes. A forgotten bag. Nothing. Then you opened a container you hadn't touched in years. Inside was an object you didn't recognize at first. You picked it up. Your heart dropped. Because suddenly, you remembered where it came from. The old building. The rainy day. The stranger. The object had been given to you that day. But why? And by whom? You turned it over. There was a small mark on the back. A symbol. The same symbol appeared in the photograph your soulmate had seen. You stared at it. Then your phone rang. It was your soulmate. You answered. Neither of you spoke for several seconds. Finally, your soulmate asked, "Did you find it?" Your entire body went still. How do you know? Silence. Then, because I have the other half. You couldn't breathe for a moment. The other half? Your soulmate explained. Years earlier, they had found a matching object. They never understood its meaning. Until recently. The two pieces were connected. Not romantically. Not magically. Physically. They fit together. And suddenly, the story became much larger than either of you. You asked, "Who gave me mine?" Your soulmate didn't answer. Instead, they said, "That's the person you need to meet." The stranger was already driving toward the location. They had found the missing date. They had found an old record. And they had found a name. The name belonged to someone who had been present during the first encounter. Someone who had seen you. Someone who had seen your soulmate. Someone who knew both sides of the story. When the stranger reached the location, the person was already waiting. Older now. Calmer. Still carrying the same secret. The stranger asked, "Why did you keep this hidden?" The person looked at them. Because they weren't ready. Who? You. The stranger stared. What does that mean? The answer was unexpected. You were never supposed to be the one who found them. The stranger stepped back. What? You were supposed to help them find themselves. That sentence sounded confusing. Until the person explained. The entire search had been based on one assumption. That the stranger was looking for you. They weren't. They were being led toward the truth. Every clue had brought them closer. Every coincidence had forced another memory into the open. And now the final piece was within reach. The stranger asked, "What happened on the missing date?" The person finally opened an old file. Inside was a photograph. Not of you. Not of your soulmate. Of 3 people. You. Your soulmate. And the stranger. All 3 appeared in the same frame. The stranger's face went pale. That can't be real. It is. But we never met. You did. When? The person pointed toward the date. The stranger remembered. Suddenly everything returned. The rainy day. The crowded entrance. The conversation. The object. And one sentence they had completely forgotten. They had spoken to you. Only briefly. Then they had spoken to your soulmate. Separately. Neither person knew the other. But the stranger had unknowingly carried information from one conversation into the next. That was the connection. That was why your soulmate eventually remembered you. That was why the stranger recognized your name. That was why the old messages existed. One ordinary encounter had quietly connected 3 lives. But there was still one missing piece. The stranger asked, "Why did you keep the photograph?" The person looked at the image. "Because your soulmate asked me to." The stranger turned pale. When? After they realized they loved them. Why would they ask you to keep it? The answer came slowly. Because they were afraid. Of what? Of telling them the truth. The stranger looked toward the door. Which truth? The person didn't answer. Instead, they handed over a second photograph. This one was recent. Your soulmate had taken it without you knowing. You were standing somewhere familiar. But you weren't alone. Someone was beside you. Someone the stranger recognized immediately. The person who had kept the secret. The stranger looked at the photograph. Then at the old one. Same people. Different years. Same connection. And finally, the stranger understood why your soulmate had been so afraid. The truth wasn't simply that your soulmate had always loved you. That part was only the surface. The real secret involved the reason your soulmate walked away in the first place. And that reason had nothing to do with a lack of love. It had everything to do with a promise. A promise made years earlier. A promise made to someone connected to you. A promise your soulmate had kept even when it broke their own heart. The stranger asked, "What promise?" The person looked toward the road. Then whispered, they promised never to tell them what happened that night. The stranger's expression changed. What night? The person finally said the date. Your soulmate heard it over the phone. You heard it too. And the moment you heard that date, the forgotten memory returned completely. You remembered the place. The people. The object. The conversation. And most importantly, you remembered what someone had whispered into your ear before you left. 3 words. Words you had forgotten for years. Words that explained why your soulmate had disappeared. Words that would finally reveal why they never stopped searching for you. And those 3 words were, they protected you. But protected you from whom? That answer was waiting. They protected you. Those 3 words stayed inside your mind. You didn't understand them at first. Then the memory came back. Not slowly. All at once. The rain. The old building. The crowded entrance. The stranger standing several steps away. Your soulmate somewhere nearby. And the person who had approached you that evening. You remembered the object they placed in your hand. You remembered their warning. Most of all, you remembered the fear in their voice. You had forgotten the details. But your heart had not forgotten the feeling. Your soulmate was still on the phone. Neither of you spoke. Finally, you asked, protected me from what? Silence. Then your soulmate answered. From something I promised I would never reveal. You waited. There was no dramatic confession. No attempt to make excuses. Just the truth. Years ago, your soulmate had learned something about your life. Something you had never told them. Not because you were hiding it. Because you didn't know they knew. A person connected to your past had approached your soulmate. They had revealed something deeply personal. Something that could have changed the way you saw certain people around you. Your soulmate was given a choice. Tell you immediately, or remain silent. They chose silence. Not because they wanted control. Because they believed revealing it at the wrong moment could cause damage you weren't prepared to handle. But there was another reason. They had promised someone they would wait. Wait until you were ready. Wait until you asked the right question. Wait until you remembered the missing piece yourself. That promise became the wall between you. And your soulmate hated that wall. Every day. Every year. Still, they kept it. The stranger finally understood. This wasn't a story about someone secretly avoiding love. It was about someone who believed protecting another person meant sacrificing their own chance to be close. But there was something your soulmate had never understood. You didn't need protection from the truth. You needed the truth. The stranger looked at the person who had kept the secret. Why didn't you tell them? The answer was quiet. Because the truth belonged to them. What does that mean? They had to choose what to do with it. The stranger looked at the photograph again. 3 people. 1 forgotten day. 1 promise. Years of silence. And suddenly, the entire story made sense. The stranger had not been sent to find you. They had been pulled into the story because they were the missing witness. They had been there. They had seen what happened. They had forgotten. Until your name brought everything back. That was why the search became impossible to stop. Every clue was connected to a memory. Every memory led to another person. Every person carried one small piece of the truth. And your soulmate had been carrying the largest piece. You asked the question that mattered most. Why did you leave? Your soulmate took a long breath. Because I thought staying would make things harder for you. You waited. Then came the sentence they had avoided for years. I loved you before I knew how to love you properly. That hit differently. Not because it sounded romantic. Because it sounded honest. Your soulmate admitted the mistakes. The hesitation. The silence. The missed opportunities. The moments when they wanted to call. The messages they never sent. The times they saw your name and closed the conversation. They weren't proud of any of it. They simply didn't know how to move forward without breaking the promise. Then you asked, "Do you still love me?" This time, there was no hesitation. Yes. One word. No explanation. No defense. Just the truth. The stranger listened quietly. They had spent days searching for you. But now they understood something. The real search had never been about locating your address. It had been about locating the truth. And the truth had finally reached the right person. You. But there was still one final mystery. The object. You still had it. Your soulmate had the matching half. You placed yours on the table. Your soulmate did the same. The two pieces fit together perfectly. You stared at them. Then noticed something engraved inside. A date. Not the date you first met. Not the date of the second encounter. A different date. A date you knew immediately. Your birthday. You looked at your soulmate. They looked just as shocked. Neither of you had put it there. The stranger stepped closer. Who made that? Nobody answered. Then the person who had guarded the secret finally spoke. I did. You turned. Why? They smiled sadly. Because that was the day your lives were supposed to cross. You didn't understand. They continued. Your soulmate was supposed to meet you that day. But we didn't. You did. Your heart stopped. What? They pointed toward an old photograph. You looked at it. And suddenly, you saw it. A person standing in the background. A familiar face. Your soulmate. You had been there. They had been there. The meeting happened. But neither of you remembered it correctly. Your soulmate had been wearing something different. You had been distracted. The encounter lasted seconds. You looked at each other. Then walked away. That tiny moment became the beginning. Years later, when you finally met properly, something inside both of you recognized the other. Neither could explain it. Now you could. The stranger smiled. That is why your soulmate said you felt familiar. Your soulmate looked down. I knew something about them felt different. You asked, why didn't you tell me all of this sooner? Your soulmate answered, because I was afraid the truth would sound like an excuse. That was the most honest answer of the entire story. They weren't asking you to forgive them. They weren't demanding another chance. They weren't trying to rewrite the past. They simply wanted you to know what had actually happened. For years, you may have wondered whether the connection meant anything. Now you had the answer. It meant something. But there was another lesson hidden underneath everything. Sometimes people disappear because they stopped caring. Sometimes they disappear because they care more than they know how to explain. Sometimes silence means rejection. Sometimes silence means fear. And sometimes, silence is a promise someone has carried for far too long. Your soulmate had carried theirs. Until the stranger accidentally opened the door. And now there was no reason to keep it closed. The stranger looked at both of you. I think I should leave. Your soulmate nodded. You smiled. But before the stranger walked away, they stopped. There is one thing you should know. You turned. The stranger held up the old photograph. I wasn't the first person searching for you. Your expression changed. What? The stranger pointed toward the date written on the back. Someone had written a name underneath. Not your soulmate. Not the stranger. Another person. Someone who had been searching long before this entire story began. You asked, who? The stranger smiled. Someone who already knew where you were. Your heart raced. Then why didn't they come? The answer was simple. Because they wanted you to choose freely. And suddenly, you understood the final truth. Nobody had been controlling the outcome. Nobody was forcing you toward anyone. Nobody was deciding your future. The people around you had simply been carrying pieces of a story until you were ready to see it clearly. Your soulmate looked at you. Not with expectation. Not with pressure. Just honesty. I don't know what happens next. You looked back. Neither did they. And for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel frightening. It felt free. Because the past had finally been explained. The unanswered questions had finally received answers. The stranger had found you. Your soulmate had finally told the truth. And the secret that had survived all those years was no longer a secret. But there is one final thing I want you to remember. If someone has ever made you feel forgotten, that does not automatically mean you were forgotten. If someone walked away, that does not always mean the connection meant nothing. And if someone remained silent, there may have been a story behind that silence you never had the opportunity to hear. But never confuse a mysterious story with a promise that a specific person is destined to return. Your life is not waiting for someone else to give it meaning. You decide what happens next. You decide whom you trust. You decide what deserves another chance. And if this story reminded you of someone, don't ignore the feeling. Not because the universe guarantees a reunion. Because sometimes a story reveals something about your own heart that you have been avoiding. Maybe you still have questions. Maybe there is something you never said. Maybe someone from your past still matters. Or maybe, you finally realize that what you truly needed was closure. Whatever your answer is, let it be honest. And if this story touched something inside you, write one word in the comments, remember. Not because a comment can control destiny. Not because it guarantees that someone will return. Write it because you know what it feels like to carry an unfinished story. And if you want more stories about hidden connections, unexpected encounters, emotional revelations, and the secrets people keep behind closed doors, subscribe. Because the next story may begin with a stranger. A forgotten message. A name appearing at the wrong time. And one sentence that changes everything. Your soulmate told a complete stranger about you. The stranger searched for you. The secret was uncovered. But the greatest revelation was never about whether someone was coming back. It was about something much more powerful. You finally discovered that the version of the past you had been carrying was not the complete story. And sometimes, the truth doesn't change what happened. It changes what the past means. That is where your real freedom begins. If you felt this message, comment, I remember, red heart, like, subscribe, and stay connected. Sparkles.